trillion from the previous 8.9.
What the fuck was that?
Which is about 1/4 of their balance sheet has been run off. But they're still paying higher yields than they're actually earning. This means the Federal Reserve is technically operating at a deficit. Now that doesn't necessarily matter to the function of the Fed because the Federal Reserve is not a for-profit institution. So when they make money, they give all the extra money to the U.S. Treasury. When they lose money, the Treasury pays them. However, it's perfectly politically an opportunity for Donald Trump right now to seize on and say, look how crappy the Federal Reserve is. They're losing billions of dollars. They're doing that in pursuit of their congressional dual mandate of maximum employment and stable prices, right? Stable inflation. Now, the problem is, you've also now got Kevin Hassett coming out saying, hey, we're going to look into a reasonable size for the Federal Reserve, which is fascinating because just in the last Fed presser, we had Jerome Powell say, we're going to start hiring fewer people and, letting natural attrition shrink the size of the Federal Reserve, which is coming at the same time as now Kevin Hassett is saying, we're going to look into the size of the Federal Reserve and maybe reducing it. Kevin Waller, who's basically applying to be the next Fed chairperson, he says he thinks he could see the Fed balance, this balance right here, drop another almost $1 trillion down to about $5.8 trillion of Fed balance sheet. That would put the Fed somewhere right around here where my mouse is, which would be leveling off higher than where we were before COVID, but obviously down substantially. That would be a time when you might actually start seeing easing from the Federal Reserve again, where they start contributing to money printing, because right now they're just doing the money vacuum, taking money out of the economy. That could be why we're seeing some weakness in jobs. Who knows? Hard to say. Markets are at all-time highs, and Bitcoin is exploding again. Why? Well, coming up. So, Donald Trump also this morning said he wants interest rates to be 3 points lower, so a full 3 percentage points lower, which would mean instead of 4.5%, it would be 1.5%, which is fantastic for people who want rates to be lower, real estate owners, stock investors, or whatever. The question is, why would rates go down that low? Well, according to the Fed, only if there were a large amount of stress in the economy, according to Donald Trump, because, well, probably it would push asset prices up, right? So you've got these sort of like dueling priorities here, but it gives you a little bit of color on why you have these dueling priorities. At the same time, Donald Trump is bragging about how his tariffs aren't having much of an impact, which if you remember, when his tariffs and his Liberation Day tariff announcements were causing the stock market to sell off by 20 to 25%, Donald Trump bluntly told everybody that this is Biden's stock market. Now, yesterday on Truth Social, Donald Trump is bragging about how his stock market is doing so well in spite of tariffs. The downside of this is it does create more of this cavalier attitude from Trump to issue more tariffs. And I think that's why we're seeing some of these aggressive letters going out to countries that are basically bringing us back to Liberation Day tariffs. And there's now talk that Donald Trump sees a new floor not of 10% tariffs, but of 20% tariffs. I partly think that's because the market is doing so well that Donald Trump is getting more cavalier because he can be. If the market were panicking, he'd be getting a lot more phone calls, pissed off, and he'd probably U-turn more. But now he's actually getting more aggressive because the market is doing quite well. A 20% floor eventually causes problems when TBD. But what is softening these tariff impacts? And how does this relate to Bitcoin? Well, what's softening the impact of these tariffs, and I'll keep this short because it can get complicated, but it has to do with foreign exchange rates. All year, the dollar has lost about 13% of its value, which is interesting because that is slightly more than the 10% tariff rate that we're applying. Now, this is something interesting because if you say, hey, I'm going to buy something or the United States is going to buy something from a certain country at a 10% tariff for $1,000, then we're spending $1,000 to go buy something from that country. If we pay a 10% tariff, we have to pay $100 in tariffs. But the dollar just lost like 13% of its purchasing power. So all of a sudden, you get a little bit of this offset to where it's almost like that money is worth less and it's absorbing the impact of that tariff already for other countries. because other countries are appreciating relative to our dollar. So it's really not the other country that is paying for these tariffs, it's us, in either the form of corporate margins, which is a little bit more blurry to pinpoint, but more likely in the loss of the dollar's purchasing power. Now if we want to go buy something for $1,000, but our dollar becomes weaker by 13%, it basically costs us 13% more immediately in the currency markets to go buy, now more expensive. Denominated money, right? Okay, so what is that tool that hedges or protects against currency depreciation? Not talking about like a risk-off hedge, and I'm not talking about inflation hedge, although you could incorporate inflation in this. Depends on if you're referring to inflation as the value of like the supply of money or prices. Like, people have different definitions for inflation, so we just put that aside for a moment, because again, it could be, oh, the price of milk is going up, oh, that's inflation. Oh, the supply of money is going up, oh, that's inflation. Right, people have different definitions, so just ignore that for a moment. And just look at the dollar losing purchasing power, which is another form of inflation. The dollar losing purchasing power can be hedged, how? By just moving to a different currency. And a lot of corporations are now moving their dollar assets to Bitcoin. And in my opinion, that's why we're seeing a lot of this breakout here recently, since sort of this Liberation Day. Oh, okay, we're going to stay with high tariffs. Yes, stock markets have moved up nicely. We've been in a little bit of consolidation here since May. But one of the reasons why I think you can see corporates jumping in and buying Bitcoin is because while risk assets are, frankly, pricing in no impacts to tariffs, the dollar is deteriorating, which makes Bitcoin look even better, because risk on is the environment that we're in, and US dollar depreciation gets hedged by Bitcoin as well. So you got this sort of like double impact of why Bitcoin is doing well. So in other words, cheat sheet, the more Trump is aggressive on tariffs, the more Bitcoin probably does well, until a recessionary environment. Because if you end up moving into a recessionary environment because you have a sudden spike in layoffs or joblessness or, a collapse in corporate earnings or whatever, then Bitcoin tends to trade like a risk asset. But not only does Bitcoin tend to trade like a risk asset where it goes down when the stock market goes down, but it also is worth mentioning that the dollar usually strengthens in a recession. Because if the US goes into recession, the entire world will probably be in a recession. And then the dollar will look like the best and strongest asset of all the other crap all around the world, because frankly, people want to buy US treasuries in recession as a safety asset, which means they have to buy dollars to buy the treasuries. So, simple bottom line to all of this, the more cavalier Trump is, the more aggressive he gets on tariffs, the more he lights the fuse of a ticking time bomb of damage from tariffs, which so far has just been delay, and eventually causes problems. But in the short term, it's fantastic for Bitcoin, because you get this dual risk asset ups, Bitcoin up. Currency depreciation because of more tariffs, Bitcoin up. You get this sort of double-edged pump towards Bitcoin along with this more corporate adoption of Bitcoin. It's very interesting. So when you consider foreign exchange, what's going on with the Fed, what's going on with Trump, it kind of all ties together. Obviously, until we get to a risk-off environment, which would likely be driven by some kind of actual fundamental deterioration in our economy, which we're just not seeing right now. Now, some of that could stress you out, but you could always balance that out by getting life insurance, by going to metkevin.com/life. That's MET, kevin.com/life. Yeah, because now you've met me. And you can get the same life insurance Lauren and I have, and you can apply in as little as 5 minutes, and you can now prepare and trade me for it. So, now, what else did we hear? Well, we heard from Waller, we heard from Goolsby as well this morning, or actually last night. Goolsby last night told us that tariffs are having a limited impact right now. Not a surprise because of the amount of delays that we've seen. Now, Goolsby is also somebody who might be trying to get a Fed job. I don't know if he's going to be able to pull it off. Waller, we talked about Hassett, we talked about Vaught, we talked about firing Powell. On firing Powell, Donald Trump did this morning reiterate that he does not intend to fire Powell, but I do expect that he's going to try to minimize the impact of the Federal Reserve and what it can do for markets. And then Donald Trump also mentions that he plans to make a big announcement on Russia on Monday, a major statement coming on Monday. It's unclear, and Donald Trump even teased this morning that you'll see big things happen soon. Unclear what this means. So far, oil markets have just been flooded with more oil, so I don't know that we're really in a place where we're worried about oil prices spiking to the point where they're really going to affect the economy. I think they'd really have to go up to about $100 to see a major effect on oil. So far, we're still under $70, so I'm really less concerned about oil markets. And when we look at the 10-2 yield curve, we see we're just at the start of kind of the shock territory of 50. But we've been here, frankly, since we got liberated and have not experienced shock. So far, so good, knock on wood. That's kind of like the MO for markets right now. Which, if we take a quick peek at the Qs almost went positive. So this morning in the Alpha report, I mentioned the most bullish thing that could happen today would be we fall and bounce off of 552. We talked about this in the course member live stream as well this morning. We bounce off 552, 557 is in play. So far it looks like we're trending straight in that direction. Hopefully that keeps going because it's bullish for overall markets, and the more money everybody has, the better. Remember, this is Webull. You can sign up for this platform at medchem.com/Webull. But my big goal is the more money you get to go make in markets means before we close our fundraise, the more money you have potentially to diversify into my real estate startup house app, where we've got a big AI announcement coming within about the next week, which will be really cool. And we'll set up some time frames for closing our fundraise. But learn more over at househack.com. You earn 5% yield paid monthly on an annual basis, obviously. And you get all the upside in the stock and downside protection. So that gives us a little bit of an outline in terms of how Trump coordinates with the Fed, why there's so much aggression against the Fed, and how it affects Bitcoin prices and asset prices and stocks. Again, what you really have to pay attention to see, okay, but like, what are the odds of a recession then? Because people keep bringing that up. The odds of recession are really hard to tell because it's all predicated on the job market. But the job market can change very, very quickly, and it's a massive lagging indicator. So it does you very, very little good to speculate on whether you'll have a recession or not, because you're waiting for indicators that will tell you you're in a recession already when it's too late. So Bloomberg actually did a little piece on this. They say the near-term U.S. recession risk is low, but there are pockets of weakness that could mutate into a downturn later this year. The weaker dollar, though, will be key as to whether the U.S. avoids that fate and stocks avoid a significant decline. For now, it's gone quiet on the recession front. Not long ago, everybody was talking about recession. They show a little chart of mentions of like how many people are talking about recession versus not. And basically, nobody's talking about recession right now. Clamor has died down, but that doesn't mean there couldn't be problems by the end of the year. We're under recession activation thresholds, but we're starting to see some data points that have given us false positives in the past. So it's really hard to say like what to believe right now. They also say that we might see other signs of coming weakness. One point to focus on might be whether the rise in WARN notices, which is the advanced layoff notices, is an indicator of weakness to come in the labor market. Some people like to use WARN notices, but those can also be very volatile. So it's hard to be a bear, because for you to be a bear, you have to rely on what may never happen, right? We may never get a surge in layoffs. Again, if we get a surge in layoffs, we're screwed, because the beverage curve will normalize, which in English just means the unemployment rate is going to skyrocket to like 10%. The Fed will cut to zero. But remember, cutting rates does not mean good. It's this that is good. the money printer, okay? You gotta print. You need the Fed going, we're buying everything, baby, nothing's gonna fail, everything is too big to fail. That's when you get real confirmation, right? Not rate cuts. But anyway, so that's the problem with being a bear, is you're basically betting on something that you have no visibility into. We could see trends weakening in the labor market, but you have no guarantee that you're gonna be right. None of the, as I say that, that's funny, the very next line here, and I didn't pre-read this, but the very next line is, none of these guarantee a recession. Exactly. Let's see. The drop in the U.S. currency could also translate to a boost for U.S. earnings, right? Because, I mean, basically you're offsetting the effect of tariffs here. It makes it more desirable for people to buy American goods, which is another thing that Trump wants, right? Trump wants, I mean, secretly, Trump wants a weaker dollar because it incentivizes people to buy American, which is what he wants in the first place. It becomes cheaper for the Saudis to go build a factory in America when the dollar drops. The more there are effects from the pipeline, blah, 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 through the rest of the year, might be enough to forestall a recession for now. Okay, they don't really tell us. But that's the point. Like, they're basically saying the same thing, that it's way too early to say, because the only thing that really tells us if we're in a recession or not at this point is the labor market. But that is something we recognize in hindsight. So for now, make as much money as you can. And I always say, if you're nervous, mostly if you're in margin, okay? So if you're in margin, in my opinion, and you're nervous, the way to play it is, let's say you're investing in the Qs or whatever it might be, right? And we're at all-time highs. You know, you set a trailing stop loss of $14 on the QQQ, as an example. Not personal financial advice, it's just an idea, right? That's about a 2.5% loss. Or set it for, you know, 520. 520 would be a $35 delta. It's about a 6% loss. That's great too. So you set a $35 trailing stop. So you go buy the QQQs right now, and if the Qs drop $35, it automatically sells and pays off your margin. You know, if the market goes up 35 points and then goes down 35, you're out break even. If it goes up $70 and then down 35, you're up 35, as an example, right? So that's why good to cancel trailing stops are really, really interesting, because they sort of automate that for you. And I just find too many times in investing, we can kind of get married to a really good idea that at the moment feels like a good idea. But if you don't have trailing stops, you just sort of like diamond hand to zero. And there are some risks to keep in mind of that. So anyway, with that said, that gives us a little bit of an update on what's going on with Trump, Bitcoin explosion, and the Fed. We're going to go to househack.com to invest before we end up changing our fundraising in the future to reflect our AI. If you want, check out Webull at matkevin.com/Webull. They're a paid partner of the channel, and matkevin.com/life, a paid partner of the channel as well. All right, very well. So, I think that's a pretty thorough update. Now, let's go see what everybody else is yapping about, because that was a lot of yapping. I don't mind yapping. People are always like, but Kevin, who's gonna edit all of the video that you just did? And I'm like, you realize the downside of me like trying to take the file, uploading it to somebody, clogging my bandwidth and my ability to like actually stream, right? Because if I go start like that file right there, that's a 3 gigabyte file on Fed, Bitcoin, and Trump. It's a 3 gigabyte file. You know, I go drop that into Google Drive now for some editor to edit or whatever. It's going to clog my bandwidth, my ability to stream, because I'm uploading it while streaming, right? We don't want to do that, because we want to make sure you have a great experience. And people are like, but Kevin, that's gonna edit the video. And then that's where I go, I will edit it. And people are like, but Kevin, how? I will show you. Let's see here. We'll show you in just one moment. Let me listen in right here for a moment. What are they talking about?
Just made up. And Joe Brennan says, bottom line is I want it in. And from then on, Joe Brennan has lied about that publicly and behind
you so much for being here, Miranda. Appreciate it. Still ahead, why does Zoran Mamdani refuse to condemn the phrase globalized?
All right, whatever. So anyway, okay, cool. So now we take our beautiful 3 gigabyte file from the streaming computer and we throw it onto the Mac, because yeah, that's where we edit stuff. And then I just drag the file into here. There it is. Look at that. And look at all the extent of editing we have to do here. Let's cut that out. And that's it. It's done. I mean, I guess if we wanted to add some flair, we could go, grab like put our little music at the beginning. Let's put our ending, with Kevin and Elon. Throw that at the end. And it's done. 20-minute video. File. Export. Why am I going to pay an editor to do that? It took like 30 seconds. It's done. Anyway, so where were we? All right, let's see what's going on over here.
Rose really feeling the brunt of this. Joining us now, TD Cowen analyst Andrew Charles. Andrew, set the scene for us. I mean, first of all, why does this matter when coffee is grown all around the world? And even if Brazil is the biggest exporter of coffee to the United States, we can get our coffee from Sumatra and Chile and lots of other places around the world.
Good morning. So Brazil has risen in importance as a coffee exporter to the United States. It's the largest, as you mentioned, and that's been growing as well. It's about 22% of the imports in 2024, and about 20% on average over the last 5 years, so growing in importance. You're right. I think that coffee competitors and coffee shops are going to really find other ways and look for other markets to really help import from. But, because Brazil is such...
On to our Republican colleagues.
We need Meet Kevin branded coffee. Except the problem with that is I'd have to go find like one that I really like. Honestly, I don't really have one that I really like. It's just it's like a utility, you take it because it's like taking a shot of vodka, it's like, nobody likes the taste of vodka. It's a utility. Like my coffee's all black right now. That's why I put it in this. Oh gosh, it just spilled. That's why I put it in this mug. This is what I look like when I drink the black coffee. All right, what else is going on here?
Because you never know. This year might be here.
Alright, well, that's boring. How about 49er? Niner. Pilots are supposed to pronounce numbers in a really funky way. Like you're supposed to say tree instead of 3. You're supposed to say fife instead of 5. And then 9 is niner. Who calls 3 tree? A pilot.
To Mr. Trump's trade policies.
Mr.
This is
Trump!
David Weston speaking with farmers in Iowa on the headwinds facing U.S. agriculture. And you can catch Wall Street Week every Friday at 6 p.m. New York time. Looking forward to tonight's episode. Now, coming up next, President Trump heading to Texas in the aftermath of the last week's catastrophic floods.
Oh, nobody's got news today.
From Washington next. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Trash. All right, whatever. So, yeah, the Bitcoin piece I think is really interesting because if you think about what's happening, Trump is basically minimizing the power of the Federal Reserve in favor of policies that are actually quite conducive towards Bitcoin doing well for now, right, until recession. Which I guess supposedly you could also say about stocks, which is also quite interesting. All right, what else is going on in stocks? So let's see here. Stonkers. We've got Q's, hanging on to 12 basis points down. Tesla lost the lead. Oh,
Lost the lead.
that's not great.
Pull up.
Okay. What about... let's go over here. LifeLock. Nope. Where are the blondies? No blondies today. Is Taylor on? 46. Because I don't know what happened to Sarah Eisen. Does anybody know when Sarah Eisen's on anymore? She's just disappeared.
Their fathers, their mothers, their husbands, their wives, they're real people. And tools like this are making it easier for anti-ICE protesters to attack, to ambush, to dox these ICE agents that are just trying to keep this nation
And we
safe.
saw what happened in Texas when there were actually 10 or 11 people that were coordinating their efforts to try to kill ICE agents. Next one, Emily, the Education Department announced an investigation against George Mason University over allegations of discrimination regarding its...
Gosh, she looks like Carolyn Lemon's sister.
Pretty conservative, relatively speaking, conservative university, if it can happen.
Like twin.
Where else it's going on?
Well, that's exactly it. And a stealthy DEI rebrand is taking place on America's college campuses. There's a reframing, rebranding, renaming of these DEI courses, position titles, DEI offices. Over 90 colleges have rebranded their DEI offices. So I want to be clear that this diversity, equity, and inclusion is still occurring in hiring and admissions practices. And I'm glad to see an administration taking it seriously. Just recently, the Department of Justice launched an investigation into the University of California for continuing to use diversity, equity, and inclusion in its hiring practices. And I think students and parents should be rejoicing that this administration is taking it seriously.
I certainly would if my kids were going there. One more, Emily. The Education Department revoking a Clinton-era rule allowing illegal migrants free tuition in technical and career schools. Emily, is this a step in the right direction?
This is absolutely a step in the right direction, but I want to be clear, this administration has much more work to do because over 20 states are still allowing in-state tuition for illegal immigrants. Recently, the Department of Justice launched investigations into 3 states, that's Texas, Minnesota, and Kentucky, for allowing in-state tuition for illegal immigrants. So in-state illegal immigrants are getting to pay in-state tuition prices of maybe $10,000, while out-of-state students are paying a sticker price of $30,000. It's absolutely unfair, and this administration is putting American students first, making sure that this process is fair and legal, and I'm glad to see it happening.
Emily, great to see you.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's something to that, you know. It is true that other Americans, if you're an out-of-state student, you know, you're paying probably even more than $30,000. If you get out-of-state tuition in like California, it's gotten very, very expensive. You know, I graduated high school in California, and they put me through the ringer to get in-state tuition, which is crazy because I graduated high school here. But they're like, oh, well, you only did 1 year of high school here, so did you come here because you wanted in-state tuition? And I'm like, good Lord, people are putting me through the ringer. And like I check all the boxes for in-state tuition, and then on the flip side, you know, they're handing out in-state tuition or discounted tuition to you know, technical people who aren't legal at all. Now, like, I can see the debate on both sides here. You know, on one side it's like, well, that's unfair to people who have been here. And then the flip side is, well, you know, hopefully if you can educate people who are undocumented, they can contribute to the economy and become functional members of society, which that's great and that's noble and all, but it doesn't align with our immigration practices, especially now. So, you know, immigration is just a freaking shoot show. SH9T show, that's what I call it.
In the very unlikely event that this did get further up through the court system, you know, trivial lawsuits in which people, as you say, take political cases and try to make them into legal issues. Those really, you know, they're very good for lawyers.
Somebody says blondes are nice, but I prefer a redhead. Isn't that really rare? Like, what's a redhead population? I would guess it's 1 in 100 females are blonde. Percentage of or redhead. A female's redhead. Less than 2% of the world's population has red hair. It's the rarest hair color. Same percentage for males and females. That's wild. That's very, very rare then. So what's the rarest eye color? It's not blue. It's got to be like purple. Purple and then like greens or whatever. Rarest eye colors. Violet and red are the rarest. Followed by green. 2% is green. And then gray is quite rare. And then hazel, which would be a combination of brown, green, and gold, are considered relatively rare, though not as rare as green or gray. Huh. Who knew?
And DeRoy Murdoch on DNC Chair Ken Martin dismissing concerns about socialist Zohran Mamdani. Lara Trump on her exclusive interview with her father-in-law, President Trump. She's got enormous insights into how that day in Butler affected him and his presidency. Clay Travis on a potential UFC fight at the White House.
I mean, I hate to say it, but I kind of feel like the Butler rally was a huge contributor to Trump winning, because like there's such an American and patriotic appeal that basically comes from somebody being so mad at what you're doing that they want to kill you, to failing and like surviving an assassination attempt. Just, I feel like when you zoom out and sort of look historically, people become more popular when somebody tries to kill them, basically. Kind of interesting. I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, we're going to be clearly paying attention to headcount and comp per employee when we start getting those results next week. Hugh, great scoop. Hugh Sun watching Goldman and AI. When we come back on Money Movers, former Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez will weigh in on these new tariffs on Canadian imports as stocks continue.
Who cares? It's all taco. Taco. You know how much Bitcoin spam there's going to be on... You ever see the comments where people like, X7C budget, whatever, is going to the moon, got in early or whatever. It's amazing. They must make good money because they spam so much. You'll get like 60 spam comments in the span of a minute from these people. And it has to be profitable because they do it every day. You know, they're probably spending thousands of dollars on bot farm comments. Yeah. And so, and it's like impossible to keep up with hiding them because basically they just change the scam every day. So like every day you have a new one that you have to go like catch and hide. But it's bad because I'll show you how dumb YouTube makes this. You ready for this? So look at this. If I put in, this is a scam, okay? Don't go to this. If I put in this token, like if you Google this token, you find a bunch of like scam YouTube posts on it or whatever. But like, just swapped all my last ETH and swapped it into this token or whatever. Like if I just search for these comments and I go through and you know, I always have to be careful not to like deal with people who are legitimate, who are like, what is this, right? But it's tough. I mean, look at this. It takes them no effort to post all of this. And I cannot select all. Like why YouTube does not give me a select all function, I don't know. But now you have to go through here and run through all this trash. And sometimes they'll post sick.
Your business depends on data, so it must be reliable. Twilio Segment collects, cleans, and activates your data, preventing siloed systems and inaccurate reporting. Data should empower, not create roadblocks. Visit segment.com to learn more.
Unless you'd like disable all comments, right? So it's like if you really wanted nobody to get hurt, I guess you can have no comments. But that's lame. And then what they come do back is they come back and they kind of like thumbs up themselves. But look at this. I'm at 77 clicks already. Just to try to delete this trash. 438 likes on that one. And then look at this. I'll get to 100. And then YouTube's like, oh, you can't select anymore. So now you can like report those, which who cares, and also deletes them. But look at this. I probably have another 100 to go. You know, it's like, I mean, you could make a job out of sitting here and deleting this trash. So if you ever see this, just know, creators know about this, and it's like the bane of our existence because it's literally like shoveling while it's snowing. I think I almost got all of this token though. There we go. But it's so toxic. There we go. But, you know, there'll be 10 more of those tokens in an hour. It's insane. I don't know. Some people have always wondered about that. So, now you know.
Former Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez.
Somebody says you can pay a service to have that removed. Do you know nothing about margins? I ain't paying for that. You know? Sorry, man. If you want to be a business owner, your goal is not to go bankrupt by having all of these little small cuts. It's never the big cuts that make a business go down. It's all the little small bull crap and subscriptions you're paying money on. That's what takes you down. No more paying money.
Behind those calls is going to join us to break out the top upside and downside names.
Right now, let's take a look at the market and how we're looking here. You're seeing the Dow off by 0.5%, the S&P down by 1/3%, the NASDAQ just slightly. Look at the 10-year, it's moving higher. The yield now 4.4%.
Yeah, it's been bobbing around that all year. I found another one. Not that we're going to do this all day long, but I mean, look at this. Literally just got rid of this one. And, you know, that was posted 17 hours ago, right? And then I go over here and I find another one that's this, you know, 57 one or whatever. And on like all of the recent videos, basically over the last, you know, whatever, few days or whatever, 444 likes, 500 likes. I mean, that's what they do. It's endless. So anyway, if you're ever bored, you know, and you want to go fight spam, go report these. Although you'll do it all day long. All right.
Partnerships throughout the world. So I note that because the largest buyer then of U.S. goods is looking to build closer ties with other markets amid all of this back and forth. Then separately, the president also told NBC News yesterday that he's considering raising the universal baseline tariff from 10%, where it's
20.
been since April, to 15 or even 20%. So for context, a minimum 20% tariff on everything the U.S. buys from abroad, plus higher tariffs for specific countries and industries, that would be a major increase in the average effective U.S. tariff rate. We are already at the highest tariff rate since 1934 on average. That's according to the Yale Budget Lab, so this would of course bring us just that much higher. Now, the president was asked in the last hour what his message was for countries ahead of this new August 1st tariff deadline. He says it'll all be fine.
Oh, I think,
Jason, how am I going to run that? Where do I paste that?
for many, many years by countries, both friend and foe. And frankly, the friends have been worse than the foes in many cases. So I would say just keep working. It's all going to work out.
As for what's next, the president threatened again yesterday to send a new tariff threat to the European Union. So that's one thing we wait to see if it comes today. Guys.
Megan, any word about what sparked the new threats against Canada?
Interesting question. Nothing yet. I've been asking this of White House officials and do not yet know what prompted this against Canada. He says in the letter that it continues to be about fentanyl. That's the reason he imposed the 25% tariffs back in February. He also says it's about the trade deficit. We do have one with Canada. It's not major, but it is a trade deficit, even though they buy more of our goods than anybody else does. One thing that's interesting, I think, about the timing, Contessa, is you guys will remember that it was just exactly 2 weeks ago that the president posted on True Social he was ending all trade talks with Canada over the digital services tax. He said he didn't like the way it was retroactive. He thought it would hurt U.S. companies, so he said everything was off.
Web dev tools, is that like an app I have to download? In Chrome, at least? I'm on Chrome. And Mac.
Tax, he relented, and then things seemed to be okay. Then there were just 2 weeks of quiet with Canada, and now this. So we don't know exactly what caused it this time around.
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, I'll bet you the president would be an awesome poker player. I mean, he really seems like he goes in and he is ready to wheel and deal. Megan, thank you for bringing us up to speed there. Appreciate it.
Meantime, let's stick with this heightened uncertainty regarding tariffs. Joining us this morning is the former U.S. Commerce Secretary and CNBC contributor.
And it says, hit F12. Okay, I did. Oh, what's new in DevTools? Oh, down here. So, oh, and do I just put it in this console thingy? Is that the thing where you paste it in? Oh, that would be interesting. That would be very nice if there's like a hack to do that. That'd be awesome.
More tariff for all imports, about 10%. We will have reciprocal tariffs on some countries, and I think it's important that the president put them on because some countries aren't going as fast and aren't cooperating as much as others. And it's important for the president to show that he is willing to use.
We're coming live to you from outside the provincial headquarters of the South African Police Service, and as Arabilia has been describing it, the turf of Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, the provincial police commissioner of the province here in KwaZulu-Natal. And of course, this is following that explosive press briefing that happened on Sunday, and now this coming Sunday, we expect the president to make an announcement following meetings that he would have had with the various stakeholders around the allegations that have been leveled against the senior members of his cabinet, and Senzo Mchunu being one of that, the police minister. And then you also have the allegations against senior members of the South African Police Service. Let's now bring in Gogo Obri-Mashik, a political analyst, to speak to us about what is unfolding. And as we have been emphasizing that although the National Police Commissioner has said that this is unprecedented times, it's not the first time that the country finds itself in a situation where very senior members of the police are implicated or accused of being involved in corruption. You'd remember Decorah, when he was the police commissioner, he was also, according to the finding of the public protector, unlawful conduct that the public protector had found in the leasing of the headquarters of the South African Police Service in KwaZulu-Natal, as well as the headquarters in Pretoria. And of course, after the Board of Inquiry, those findings were overturned by the High Court. You also have the likes of Jackie Selebi, who was linked to the underworld, and he was also convicted on some of the charges that had been brought against him. And at that time, you may remember that Thabo Mbeki was the president of the country, also questioned the conduct of the NPA around the prosecution of Jackie Selebi. But let's bring in Gogo Obri-Mashik now to have this conversation. Gogo, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. What are some of your takeaways around what has unfolded over this period? The president was in Brazil, of course, when this press briefing took place, and now this Sunday we expect an announcement from him about what's going to happen going forward.
How I look at all of this is in terms of the relationship.
Settle down, brother. This is the Quarter Report, powered by ENC.com. South Africa's movie. Welcome to the watch party. At the end of one of the wildest weeks in modern South African history, and I include elections in that, we wait to hear what President Ramaphosa is going to say on Sunday. It's giving COVID family meeting vibes. It's giving generational crisis in South Africa, and the president is taking his time, consulting with stakeholders, talking to folks, and probably making strategic calls. And then on Sunday, he's going to make this big address to the nation. We're going to give you some small additional news, like the MK party also opening a charge against Senzo Mchunu, police minister, as well as Shadrach Sibia. But mainly, we're going to talk in this episode about two things. One, what are Ramaphosa's options on Sunday? Because it's hard to tell what his options are going to be. We reported yesterday, of course, about how 3 different standing committees in Parliament are going to do investigations. They're not going to have conclusive findings by Sunday. Absolutely not. So he's going to have to say something based on what he's been able to gather from strategic phone calls and meetings with different people in the next literally handful of days. And then the second thing is whether or not, and I know we keep talking about this, but really this time whether the government of national unity will survive this for a lot of reasons. One, because the way the DA is acting in Parliament right now, voting against budgets, will stop the appropriation bill, which will cause close to what the Americans will call a government shutdown, turning off the taps of all of the different budgets across government. But two, because the ANC top brass have been postponing their NEC meeting, their National Executive Committee meeting, most believe because they've been trying to avoid that meeting because the top brass don't want to end the GNU with the DA in it, but it seems there's a massive lobbying group within that NEC that's going to argue that we need to kick the DA out. So they've been postponing that, but it is now going to happen in about 2 weeks' time. And so more than ever before, I would argue, we now need to ask if the government of national unity will survive this, because it's not looking good, bruv. And remember, of course, as I always say, you can watch the entire show on enca.com and nowhere else. If you're watching on YouTube, click on the link in the description. But the main thing is that Cyril Ramaphosa is speaking to us on Sunday. I assume it's going to be Sunday night. It always is. I don't know why he likes sunset or after. That clearly seems to be when he feels like he's feeling himself and kicking the hardest. But he's speaking to us on Sunday night. And on the one hand, as you know, I have to say, finally, why hasn't he done so already? I feel like he should have done so already. On the other hand, I can understand why he, not necessarily as the president, but as the president of the country, but as the president of the ANC, is taking his time. Because Senzo Mchunu and the other implicated people are incredibly powerful. Senzo Mchunu, I will remind you, was KZN Premier. He was a key reason why Ramaphosa was able to defeat Jacob Zuma, because he switched from Zuma's camp to Ramaphosa's camp. He's got enormous sway backing and following in KwaZulu-Natal, which is a province which the ANC has to recover. They dropped from over 50%, I think, in 2019 down to just under 20% in 2024, a historic collapse. And they need to recover those voters. KZN is, I think, still the second most populous province in terms of voter numbers after Gauteng. It's really important to them. And so he needs to try and figure out what to do. As I have said, I think that he should suspend, maybe call it special leave, but he should put this police minister on special leave, because in this unique situation, the police minister is being investigated and has the power to tamper with or get involved in investigations into himself. Maybe he should also, President Ramaphosa might, as an option, think to himself, cool, we don't want to make it seem like we're presuming Police Minister Mchunu guilty, and so we are also going to put General Mkhwanazi on special leave. Again, not to make him look guilty or wrong, but just to remove the two people from the ability to influence the process. Of course, as you've seen this week, there have been explicit threats to violence and uproar and civil unrest in KZN, similar to the July 2021 riots, if Mkhwanazi is touched. And by touched, the people who are saying this mean basically suspended, fired, or killed. We know that there's been extra security placed on General Mkhwanazi's house, which I think is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I don't think we need to read any more deeply into that. It's just a sensible thing to do. I'm sure that he's received death threats. This is the kind of thing that happens when you expose, or at least put claims against people of this level of power, involving criminal syndicates, politicians, the judiciary. Oh yes, the Constitutional Court Chief Justice Maya has come out, or at least called for Mkhwanazi to provide evidence of what he claimed about being certain members of the judiciary being compromised. And they've seemed quite offended by that allegation, or at least offended that there was an allegation without evidence, because the judiciary has come out and said, we really need to and want to deal with this, provide us the evidence so that we can investigate. So there are all these different moving parts, and I think that's why the president is taking his time. He needs to figure out if he's going to suspend or fire him, or at least place Mchunu on special leave. What are the optics of that going to be? He needs to figure out what he's going to do about Higher Education Minister Nkabane, who's currently under investigation also, with charges against her on the way, also for lying to Parliament about the CETA deal, or the CETA board members that she put in place and then took away, and then said there was a special advisory panel, and there wasn't a special advisory panel, named the people allegedly on this panel, who then came out in public and said that no such panel ever happened involving them. And as Times Live reported on this morning and explained, the dynamic is also that those are two sort of ministers, and if you are worried about the ANC's voter base and support in KwaZulu-Natal, as Ramaphosa is, you have to think about that. If they place these ministers on special leave or fire them, are they going to put different reputable Zulu leaders from the ANC in power? Who are they going to be? Will that be accepted by the ANC National Executive Committee? As we'll talk about in a bit, that's the big threat to the GNU right now, is this impending NEC meeting that has been suspended for months. And the fact that the DA is now voting in such a way to block budgets of departments that could ultimately threaten the provision of funding for this financial year to the entire government. We're going to get to that in a bit. So these are all the things that Ramaphosa is weighing up. And I imagine he is going to come out with some read of Mkhwanazi's claims. I don't think he can come out and just say, hey, so like, as I said in my tweet on Monday, yeah, we're looking into it. I'm going to figure it out. I really hope he doesn't call for a commission of inquiry, because people are sick of that. People are sick of waiting for a year to find stuff out. We need decisive investigation and decisive action. But he's got a real challenge on his hands. Senzo Mchunu was incredibly influential. The allegations around Kat Matlala also extend to Becky Taylor, the previous police minister, another ANC big shot, who's a big shot in the security forces and the police. Ramaphosa has got a tough job in his hands strategically to figure out what he should do and how he should handle it. And so we wait to see what he's going to do on Sunday. I cautiously think he has to do something more than just providing new information, more than just evolving his press statement from earlier in the week. I think he has to suspend or place on special leave one or a handful of people. And I think he has to give us a timeline by which he says his investigations into the documentation and the evidence will be complete, so that he can then make decisions. Because remember, it's not just Mchunu and Mkhwanazi, Shadrach Sibiya, it's Dumisani Khumalo, who was arrested, the head of police crime intelligence, another Zulu man from KZN. There are so many interlocking dynamics. As we reported on earlier in the week, the fact that there are social media rumblings about there being an anti-Zulu, or like a purge of Zulu men, powerful Zulu men in SAPS, because Khumalo is Zulu and because Mkhwanazi is also Zulu, but it's more complicated because Mchunu is Zulu. And so there's all these weird dynamics that Ramaphosa has to try to handle, and I think we need to be keeping all of that in mind when he addresses us on Sunday night. In the meantime, though, the big reporting this morning from Times Live, News 24, and a bunch of others is the fact that the GNU might really now be on death's door. And it's been contributed to by this Mchunu situation and Nkabane, the Higher Education Minister. But it's mainly the fact that it looks like the ANC is finally going to have their first NEC meeting since, I think, March. It was before the DA moved to just stop the fiscal framework for Budget 2.0 for sure, and then later went to court, which contributed to massive anger within the ANC NEC against the Democratic Alliance. And to be fair, the DA is crossed with the ANC too, and there are people within the DA who want the DA to walk from the GNU. But at the moment, it seems like the top brass and the FedEx of the DA is like, if we are kicked out by the ANC, that'll be good optically for us. Otherwise, we're not leaving, because we want to make it look like the ANC is unwilling to govern and take criticism and co-govern with another party, another significantly powerful party. And so if the DA was to be kicked out, the ANC would probably try to draft Action SA in its place, and would give it an incredibly slim majority in the GNU, of the GNU in Parliament, and they would be vulnerable to being shaken down by smaller parties on basically every single vote, because the margin is so small that if even the smaller parties said, we don't feel like actually going with this unless you give us some kind of concession, then they wouldn't get votes through. But now, finally, after months of the top brass of the ANC postponing NEC meetings, seemingly to avoid giving NEC members an opportunity to push for and vote by majority on kicking the DA out, seeming to avoid that, to try and make sure that that doesn't happen, the NEC meeting seems like it's going to happen in a few weeks' time. And it's going to happen in light of the decisions Ramaphosa is going to make and announce on Sunday. It's going to involve talking about Senzo Mchunu and the reputational damage to the ANC of these allegations from General Mkhwanazi. It's going to involve talking about the investigations from the standing committees into Mkhwanazi's claims and evidence. It's going to involve how to manage the fallout for the ANC reputationally with the 2026 local government elections coming literally second half of next year. And it's going to involve anger and fury that the DA has taken another police case and filed another charge against another ANC minister and moved to try and get ANC ministers out. Because remember, the DA has now decided they're going to vote against budgets of the Higher Education Department and of the Human Settlements Department, because they're led by extremely, let's just say, under a cloud ministers Simelane from Human Settlements and Nkabane from Higher Education. And the problem is, I know that the budget kept getting kicked down the road and people were like, how